So, good morning, everyone. I'm Íñigo de Miguel Beriain. I work for the University of the Basque Country in Bilbao in the north of Spain. So, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. As you know, this panel will be devoted to analyze a quite interesting issue. It is entitled a Bridging the Regulatory Gap for AI Medical Devices, the new layer introduced by the AIAct. I think it's a very interesting topic because you know that there will be a lot of novelties. We will be in a new scenario quite soon. As we all know, AI is working quite well, and especially it's working quite fast. So this is one of the main issues that we have, that most of the issues we considered some years ago maybe are out-fashioned right now, and we need to update what we have. This is particularly true in terms of our laws. As I guess you all know, we have now new regulation that's about to be approved. I think it will be, well, it's been approved. It's going to be published. I guess that it might be published next week or something like that. So this will probably solve some of our problems, but surely it will bring us a lot of headaches, you know, because there are lots of things that we need to consider. There are lots of things that are pretty unclear. So we are here in order to try to face some of those issues, especially those related to the way in which we will address issues created by AI systems in healthcare. So there are 4 highly skilled people in this panel who will share with us the thoughts, their knowledge, and I'm really excited to know what they will tell us. In order to make things a little, let's say, not boring, they will just introduce the thoughts about what are the main issues and what are the most important things that we should consider while addressing this topic, and it will be just like about 5 minutes for each panelist, okay? And then there will be a time for the discussion, the debate with the panelists. There will be some questions that I have ready in mind, just in case you are all shy. I hope that this will not be the case and you will also participate in that, okay? So we will be starting. I don't really know who's gonna be the first one, and I don't really know why I consider myself young enough to read these kind of things, you know, because it's one of the things that happen with the years is that you forget that you are getting old, and I'm not always the best in reading small letters. Anyway, I will start, for example, with Isabel, okay, and we will follow that. So Isabel is an AI advisor, privacy engineering, and the co-founder of Right, a consultancy and research firm based in the Netherlands, specialized in responsible AI and privacy by design. She's also the author of Plot for AI, an open source tool for the identification and assessment of AI risk based on threat modeling methodology. She's also one of the members of ENISA, ad hoc working group on data protection engineering, and a member of the pool of experts from the European Data Protection Board. She's also a national expert at ISO, working on the development of standards related to AI and privacy engineering. That, I think we all know, is one of the hot topics right now. What's wrong with the standards? So Isabel, please let us know.
Okay, well, we are a small group, so that's great. So I really hope we have a lot of interaction there this morning. It's really a challenge. I already did my exercise to come here running to be on time, so I'm done for today. We're going to talk today about the AIAct, medical device regulation, and I was, I see Eduard here from Leiden University. He was my professor when I studied there. But I have the conversation with Francine, also one of the professors, and it was just funny because if you are, if it's when English is not mother tongue, if you say medical device regulation in distance sounds a bit like magical. So we were making fun, like, well, with the AIAct and MTR, eventually it's kind of a magical device regulation because like devices become completely magical with all this new AI and cool stuff happening with generative AI. Well, jokes apart. Something that I wanted to mention is that I move from the field of privacy and security and standardization. What surprised me is that with the AIAct, I see especially a lot of colleagues from the privacy field do not really mention too much about safety. So it's all about comparison with the GDPR, for instance, but it's like we don't realize that we have MDR, like kind of a copy of AIAct in a reduced version. It's like, well, maybe we need to change a bit our mindset and realize that the AIAct is not really like a copy of the GDPR, but it's really a product safety regulation, and we need to get used to, well, to the new formatting and all that. And my specialization is on risks, and especially AI risks. This is where I've been researching since years ago. What I wanted to say, if you look at the two regulations, MDR, AIAct, there's quite a lot of similarities, and it's good to have that in account. So they both mention the nature of that you need to have a risk management system, that this will need to check the risks in an iterative way. Also important, really challenging in AI systems. They both described briefly the way that you should do risk management, from the identification of risk to the analysis, classification, take mitigation measures. When you identify risks, they also mention a concept important also for notified bodies, that is the intended use or purpose of the application. So we should not forget about that, because that also determines a bit the scope of when you're looking at risks. But of course, you also need to look further in foreseeable misuse of an application, and you don't keep just in what you are looking. And they both also mention about residual risks. Also really important, when you work in risk management, it's really important to look at residual risks and how to solve them. And it's something that I noticed in the privacy profession, maybe we are a bit less mature sometimes about risk management, so we don't really go so far. We just find some risks, we try to find some mitigation measures, but we need to move forward. And with safety regulation, we need to establish a proper risk management system in which once you classify your risks, you identify them, you find, you decide on certain mitigation measures, you apply them, then you evaluate your residual risk if you still have risks, and then you move forward. Something that is different in the MDR, for instance, that they mention the concept of benefit risk analysis regarding your residual risk. So once you even apply mitigation measures, you still have risks. Well, then you need to do a benefit risk analysis, looking at the benefit for the user or the patient, and how that outweighs the risks. That is something that we don't see so specifically in the AIAct, so it's also important to have in account. But in both regulations, risks are defined exactly the same, and I will just read it. Risk is the combination of the probability of occurrence of harm and the severity of the harm. Exactly the same definition in both regulations. And really important difference also is that in the AIAct, we don't only look at the risk of safety and health, but very important also at the risks of fundamental rights. And that is what brings me to standards. Really shortly, I also see in the profession that we don't mention often about standards. I was in some meetings with authorities, thinking about how to solve this, how to solve that, and I was surprised. Well, we are in the standardization groups. I'm specifically in the one of risk management. We are thinking already about all these and how to solve this, and eventually organizations will have the opportunity to have an harmonized standards where if they follow, that will it will be a way to demonstrate conformity with the AIAct. These harmonized standards comes from requirements from the standardization request. That's how it's called, from the European Commission. And then it's when European standardization bodies like Sensenelec gather a group of experts, and they start working on these technical standards for organization as like a guidance to comply. And at this moment, for medical devices, there's two important standards. There's one for risk management, the 14,971. There's even a guidance how to implement that one that has been released not so long ago. And there's also one for quality management systems. So just to see that there's similarities with the AIAct, with what is to come. Now, just the last point, and then I'm done, regarding something important that the AI Act is a horizontal regulation. So the scope of applicability is about all AI systems and not specifically on sectors. The medical device regulation is sectoral regulation, something we are a bit afraid if now, what is it going to mean for medical devices now, or what is going to come. The intention is that it is only the kind of the gap analysis, only the extra things that are necessary will have to be added, but that not that suddenly for medical devices you will need to have a new risk management system or a new quality management system. That is really not the intention. So only if something is necessary will be added. And that is what we are working in the standardization to make it work like that, so that still the standards for medical devices work, and only if something extra is missing is what will have to be added. And I keep it here because it was 5 minutes, and I cannot say much more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And now it's time for Guillermo Lazcoz. Okay, yes, we will follow this order. Okay, that's fine. And Guillermo Lazcoz, he's got a PhD in law, and he's a postdoc researcher right now in Spain in the CPDP of Rare Diseases, and member of the Research Ethics Committee of the Instituto de Salud Carlos III. So, Guillermo, what can you tell us about this?
Okay, so thank you. I wanted to give a bit of context on what this new layer of the AIAct brings to the biomedical research in those 5 minutes. Last week I was at the annual conference of the Spanish National Association of Research Ethics Committees, and there I participated in a workshop that we were evaluating how to deal with AI in biomedical research. So I thought that it could be interesting to bring here some of the general conclusions that we arrived at in that workshop and link that to how the AIAct approaches scientific research, and subsequently link that with the medical device regulations. So the first issue highlighted by the Research Ethics Committee members was that, as you already know, AI is proliferating everywhere in biomedical research, not only in biomedical research, but also in biomedical research. And it is not only about the many possibilities where AI can be implemented in this kind of research, meaning, for example, for all the possible uses for AI in pharmaceutical development and delivery. That goes from basic scientific research, pharmaceutical discovery, preclinical studies, clinical trials, and so on. Or we can even imagine all the possibilities that we have with generative AI for implementing it in any kind or any stage of biomedical research. So it is not only about the possibilities of integrating AI in biomedical research, but also that everyone is calling everything AI. It may be a trend, it may be easier to get funds if you say that you are using AI. That's a possibility too. I don't know, but the fact is that research ethics committees are receiving more and more evaluations of studies with AI. Even if they are not using AI as now defined by the AIAct or as it was defined in other policy documents, previous policy documents by the European Commission. So therefore, the first concern is that AI is everywhere. The paradoxical second issue is that everyone wants to have AI, but no one wants to call it a medical device. No matter the stage of the study, and maybe here we can discuss, probably collecting data for training for the first time, your system cannot be considered a clinical investigation under the medical device regulation, but there are no doubts that if you are validating your algorithm with prospective data, you are carrying out a clinical investigation under the medical device regulation. So The second concern is about where in the AI AI system life cycle, where you should draw the line to consider where there is a clinical investigation with AI medical devices. And last but not least, the Research Ethics Committee members find huge methodological and ethical concerns regarding the use or development of AI in biomedical research. Among the analyzed cases, we found, for example, studies that randomly mention many algorithmic approaches or that merge in the same study very different phases, like from training to validation, something that, as you already know, these kind of flows are inconceivable for other clinical or biomedical studies. So third concern, the huge methodological and ethical issues that we are witnessing there. On the legal ground, since I'm a lawyer, looking at the different real cases that we analyzed during the workshop, it became really clear that we need to establish two main categories of AI in biomedical research. On one side, biomedical research, where AI is integrated for scientific purposes as part of the study. And on the other side, biomedical research aimed precisely at developing AI that can be subsequently used for biomedical purposes. So those two main categories allow me to go into the AIAct because we see that differentiation also in the AIAct. So if we were to recital 25, for example, it says that the AIAct should support innovation, respect freedom of science, and therefore it is necessary to exclude from the scope of the AIAct systems and models specifically developed and put into service for the sole purpose of scientific research and development. You can find that exclusion then in the Article 2.6. And this exclusion is also applicable for developers and users of generative AI. This is general purpose AI with the sole purpose of scientific research. That's something that we may have to discuss, but well. And however, without prejudice of this exclusion, the AIAct considers that any other system that may be used for the conduct of any research and development activity should remain subject to the AIAct. So if it's not the sole purpose of research, it's subject to the AIAct. And regarding the second category, this is the biomedical research aimed precisely at developing AI that then can be used for biomedical purposes. The AIAct does not apply to any research, testing, or development activity regarding AI prior to their being placed on the market. So this means that for research activities with high-risk AI that will apply, for high-risk AI, will apply the medical device regulation for the research and testing when we are developing an AI system with a specific for medical purpose, and or alternatively for the rest of them, the AIAct adds that any research and development activities should be carried out in accordance with the recognized ethical and professional standards for scientific research and should also be conducted in accordance with applicable union law. So my two concerns, maybe for the discussion and to conclude, are first, how we should interpret what is an AI system specifically developed for the sole purpose of scientific research and development, because this exclusion can have deep consequences in this field. And I think that maybe here the European legislators are confusing innovation and research, that are different things. And the second issue is how we enforce regarding the conclusions from the Research Ethics Committee workshop, how we enforce the already applicable medical device regulations, because the systems that will escape from the medical device regulations will also escape from the AIAct. So I think that's enough for me.
Yep, thank you so much, Guillermo. We will probably come back to some of these issues in the discussion because there's a lot of things to think about. So, moving forward, here we got a Frusina Molnar-Gabor. She's professor of international medical and health law, as well as data protection law at the University of Heidelberg in the Faculty of Law and Biocont. She's advisory board of in so many boards and so many important boards that she's quite well known. So, for example, the Ethics and Governance Committee of the Human Cell Atlas, they use 1+ million genomes initiative, especially in the working group related to ALSI. And she's also a member of the European Group on Ethics in Science and New Technologies. She was awarded with the Heinz Meyer Leibniz Prize, and I think she's one of the main experts in data protection issues, for example. So, what could you tell us, Frusina?
Thank you very much, Inigo. Very kind introduction. I do think there are important points already mentioned with regard to risk assessment and the different types of risk assessment, ones from Isabel and also from Guillermo about what is actually scientific research and how it relates to innovation, foremost if we think about the medical context where we have a lot of translation, so that the bench to bedside, developing medical products out of research and immediately or in a timely manner applying them in the clinical setting really blurs the lines with these definitions. And I would like to put up a focus on data protection and the relation of different data protection obligations to the different actors from organizational perspective, so understanding law development and implementation and the enforcement of policies in a sense of an organizational obligation for different authorities and different actors. I would like to begin with emphasizing the already known scopes and aims of the AIAct, which do include safety for AI systems, for the market while maintaining a high level of protection for various values and goods such as health and safety and fundamental rights. I would like to emphasize that legal certainty is an aim in the AIAct. Don't smile. Governance is also a specific focus to strengthen effective enforcement of any kind of applicable law. And also, of course, the internal market perspective, as we are confident with that with regard to AI and EU regulation. So one is the governance perspective, that the AIAct specifically has this aim of better governance, so to say, and also legal certainty in the sense of harmonizing, standardizing cross-regulatory issues. We do have the well-known different risk levels in the different AI systems, those that are prohibited, the high-level ones, the specific AI systems, and those minimal risks. And the AIAct does define specific data processing related obligations for the different actors related to these different risk levels, such as, for instance, specific governance obligations for those who are developing high-risk systems, specific transparency obligations for those developing specific systems. We will hear about that from Anastasia in a second. But the main, so to say, issue is that it is declared that data protection laws, be it the GDPR or the new ones emerging, the Data Governance Act or the Data Act, apply. So the AIAct does not claim to develop specific data protection rules. For this reason, there is, and this is my first point I would like to discuss with you, a little bit of mess with regard to what extent data protection interest can be set back in the favor of applying and implementing the AI regulation. If we think about the standard, for instance, for the anonymization of data, or the transparency obligations or information obligations, well known from the GDPR, or the provision of consent, all those issues. So the trade-off in the AI Act with regard to competing interests in the sense of, for instance, privacy protection, security, upholding fundamental values, and the other side, data processing in the interest of safe and standardized AI systems, might be a different trade-off than we usually know from other data protection contexts, and the question is how this plays out. The other issue I would like to make shortly is about this organizational perspective of data protection. With the AIAct, there are a lot of new authorities emerging in the member states. For instance, each member state is obliged to create national competent authorities, which are notifying bodies, which are market surveillance authorities. Data protection supervisory authorities are involved in cooperation with these new authorities into the world of supervising AI development, such as AI sandboxes, and there are specific competencies defined for the European Data Protection Supervisor as well with regard to union bodies and with regard to the new Office for Artificial Intelligence. And all these bodies, of course, are themselves subject to data protection regulations. So when they deal with data, they are the addressees of these rules and they have to adhere to data protection, but they're also in a supervisory role. And I think there is too little thinking about the various options, legal options for the distribution of competencies and obligations when it comes to this surveillance, because the only thing we have in these regulations is that the competent bodies should work together, they should coordinate their work. But however, it is going to be a very sophisticated issue for member states to create these bodies, to define their competencies, harmonize with supervisory authorities, and to work towards a coordinated effort when it comes to the increasing amount of supervisory authorities and who is responsible for what with regard to data processing supervision. So there is a certain, so to say, competition between all these authorities, I think, with regard to surveillance activities related to data processing. And it will be interesting to see how these cooperation networks play out in EU administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frosina. Then we have as our last speaker, Anastasia Kiseleva, who is a Utopia PhD co-tutel fellow, doctoral researcher at Brugge University, Brussels, and COY Sergi Research, Paris University, sorry. So she's now hopefully about to end up with her PhD studies. And I dare say that she's very brilliant as a writer. I can tell you I have the privilege to co-authorize a paper with her, so I can tell you that this is really true. I think she's one of the people who knows the best about some of the topics that we are addressing, such as transparency. And for instance, she's an external policy expert at the HUMAS, the European Union of Medicine in Assurance and Social Security. And she's been awarded with several prizes. That is quite nice, especially because it's really showing that I'm telling you the truth when I'm saying that she's very good in writing. So for example, she has won the 4IP Council Research Award in 2018 and twice the AIHPL prizes for the most influential articles in 2020 and 2023. So please, Anastasia, tell us anything about transparency.
Thank you very much, Inigo. That's a very kind introduction. I'm a bit shy right now from all these kind words. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here despite the early time. And I'd like to talk about transparency. That's the topic that I've been researching for the last 4 years. And as our panel is actually titled as AIAct is introducing the new layer to the current legislation, I'd like to pose the question if the AIAct actually introduces the new layer in terms of transparency, the new layer to the medical device regulation. And the more I explored the medical device regulation, the more I saw that actually many things discussed nowadays in the context of transparency are already in this piece of legislation. So I'm going to show this in comparison of the medical device regulation and the AIAct. And I will speak in transparency is really multifaceted, multi-layered concept. In medical context, it might be transparency toward users, toward healthcare professionals. It might be transparency toward patients, and it might be transparency for the developers of the technology, because it's opaque even for the developers. And also in the AIAct, transparency is actually refers to 5 different things. It's communication, it's information provision and instructions, it's documentation, it's traceability, and I'm the weirdo with the slides, I'm sorry, and even worse, there is also a lot of text, but it's necessary for me to actually show you that the AIAct is not that fresh, and it's not that innovative in respect of information provision and interpretability requirements. So first, I compared the purposes of transparency that are specified in the 2 pieces of legislation. And as Francine already mentioned about legal certainty, to me, actually, the one that is specified in the medical device regulation is more certain, because it also says that that medical professionals should be empowered, and also patient, by transparency. And also it says actually what is transparency a bit. While in the AIAct, it's a bit of more general wording. And these are 5 things that I already mentioned that are in the AIAct. And then we also have the form of representation of information provision and instructions. Again, as you can see, they are quite similar. And again, there are even more details in the medical device regulation in terms of how information should be provided to healthcare professionals. And it says that it should be relevant and tailored to his or her technical knowledge, experience, education, or training. It should be written in the readily understandable terms and supplemented with drawings and diagrams. Again, in the AIAct, the sense is more or less the same, but the formulation is less specific, I would say. And the scope, that's the most interesting. So I'm sorry for the amount of text. You don't need to read all of it. Just follow me. There are 3 main points of the information that should be provided to healthcare professionals together with the medical device. In the medical device regulation, it says that healthcare professional doctors should be informed about first intended purpose, and then in the Article 13 on transparency and information provision, in the AIAct we also see the same, but again with less details. Then we have information concerning performance and safety, so doctors should understand capacities and actual metrics of the device that they use. And again, the same also specified in the AIAct. And the last but not least, there is a big list of information that doctors should receive together with the medical device that they are going to apply in the medical settings. And nowadays they already apply AI medical devices because hundreds of them are already placed on the market. And so the last is safety measures. First, they should receive the training, and they also should know what kind of precautions should they take for using the device safely. And in the AIAct, we also have, first of all, the information about risks and residual risks, as was already mentioned, but Isabel, And also there is like specific article on human oversight measures. So they're like quite similar, and we can see actually that in this sense the AIAct doesn't introduce much the new layer. And it actually explains why hundreds of AI-based medical devices are already being used in medical settings, despite that we don't yet have AI being enforced. There is like research that actually says like how many AI applications are already on the market. And then, of course, it's great that the two acts are quite aligned, because that will also make it easier for the compliance and conformity assessment in the future, because the two acts have to be applied together. But it doesn't mean that the AIAct is useless. Of course, there is something also new in the AIAct, and that's famous interpretability requirement. And the requirement is quite, so it's good and bad. It's good that it actually says that explanations should be useful for deployers and users. And in our case, it's healthcare professionals. And it says that it should be useful to use appropriately for their purposes and also to comply with their requirements. And one of these requirements that are placed on deployers' shoulders is human oversight measures again. But there are many questions, and that's kind of teaser for you. I have some answers, but I'm not going to reply yet because I think we can have it in the discussion. So in the text, like there is a lot of vague and opaque specifications. For example, what is transparent operation of AI systems, or how to interpret the word interpret. And for example, like if like we see that interpretability is seen inside the black box, then many AI systems will be out of the scope of this requirement. But I don't think that was like the intention of the legislator. But then we need clarifications. And the most important is actually how should AI developers themselves define sufficiency and appropriateness of transparency and interpretability, because they are not experts in medical domain. They don't know what will fit to the specific doctor using the specific application, for example, in heart disease identification or flu identification. And yeah, so I would also discuss in the panel debate how to avoid placebic explanations and how to make transparency actionable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. So now it will be the time for the discussion. So if you just let me, I will just ask a few questions just for clarification, and they will all let you all participate, okay? So the questions related to clarification that might serve us all well. Okay, first of all, let me start by something that it seems to me quite difficult to address. Let's talk about generative artificial intelligence, okay? That, to my understanding, when the AI draft was written a long time ago, I think that nobody had in mind generative AI at that time. Or maybe there were some people, but it was not the real, the key thing. So I will just make a very practical question. Imagine that you are thinking about using a kind of generative AI system, for example, in mental health. You are using kind of AI generative system in order to have a kind of therapy with your patients, because this generative AI works as well as a physician in order to try to address some kind of mental diseases. So you could have kind of therapeutical talks with the patients, and the patients maybe know, but they don't distinguish in between the AI and the physical. So if we are using that kind of generative AI, should this be considered as a medical device? Because to my understanding, if it was created for a general purpose and not specifically for that, it should not be considered as such. So what will be the obligation in this case? Only transparency is the only thing that we should have. And in case it is transparency, what kind of transparency precisely? I mean, is it even easy to guarantee this kind of transparency when you are talking about generative AI, and what should be the information to be provided to a patient that is, for example, suffering from a mental disease, or whoever takes care of that? I don't know who's willing to take this question. I think it's not so easy in so many ways. So, a volunteer, please, in the panel. Guillermo, you are smiling the most. Should not smile in a panel.
No consent here.
No, no consent at all. No, for your question, my only thoughts are that if you want to integrate generative AI in the clinical practice, you should do that regarding the standards settled for clinical practice. So if you want to add generative AI to your diagnostic flow, you should test that. And then I'm back to my how to we deal with biomedical research in the AIAct. But that is the thing. For me, you should try that in a secure environment. Actually, the only exclusion for testing high-risk AI or generative AI, the only exclusion, the not exclusion is regulatory sandboxes and real-world testing. So you could use that is in the AIAct to test whether you can introduce generative AI in your clinical workflow. But I think that you have to you need to have evidence to do that first, and I will stop there.
I think Lucina wants to add something to this. Yep. Yeah. I think that, yeah, it's Anastasia who was gently taking the word. So, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'd like to also agree with Guillermo, and also it's a tricky question with ChatGPT, for example, or generative AI applications, because on the one hand, it says that classification and qualification should be based on intention of the manufacturer, and apparently producers of ChatGPT don't really want to make it a medical device. But on the other side, it's really important to ensure the same level of safety and quality as it is right now for the medical device regulation. And there was a good paper of Professor Stephen Gilbert, who actually analyzed the issue, and he explained why actually this type of application should comply with the medical device regulation. And I think, like on the high level, like understanding, it's really important also for deployers, so for healthcare institutions and for doctors, to make sure that actually the application that they use and they rely on went through conformity assessment procedure, because otherwise there is like a responsibility issue arises. And for example, if they use the medical device that went through conformity assessment procedure, then if anything goes wrong with the device, then the manufacturer should take responsibility. But when, for example, a doctor uses ChatGPT, who should take the responsibility? I doubt that it should be a manufacturer. And of course, without this conformity assessment procedure, all the transparency requirements, all the quality requirements are not really established. So you could see like what is provided with generative AI applications. Not so much data. You have no idea on what kind of data it was tested, or what are the capacities of, what are the risks. There are no explanations, for example. And if it goes through medical device regulation and then the AIAct requirements, then it should be provided. But if it's outside of the scope, then we are just left as not knowing anything besides that, it's not explainable sometimes, but you don't have basic information about performance and safety and quality. So that's my sense.
Thank you very much. I think it's a bit a question of trade-off. So the EU regulator or whoever makes the legislation does do, on a very high level, a trade-off between competing interest positions. For instance, is the medical device or the application and usage of a certain AI system in a medical context beneficial for the regulatory aims with regard to scientific research in healthcare? And what is on the other side that should be balanced against this benefit from the perspective of the patient or the medical care or the doctor, such as privacy interests, such as the risks. So we do have a high-level trade-off in the regulation that can be traced back in many very general rules, such as the classification of AI systems with regard to their risks and so on. But then it is somehow, so to say, in the concrete setup, as in Inigo's example, with regard to mental health, of course, a singular individual case that has to be decided with regard to the decision whether to apply an AI system in a fair way according to the very specific circumstances of that very case. And so all of these specific issues around that specific case are then, so to say, delegated to those in the application deciding on the usage of an AI system. That could be the medical doctor, but it also boils down to the autonomy of the patient with regard to, am I able to assess the risks for my health with regard to this application? And if I'm fully aware of this, those risks, and I can assess them, this is the condition to give a valid informed consent, I will agree. The question is how far this can be pushed to the patient itself with regard to his or her autonomy and decision making. What remains with the doctor, so to say, to define? How do we define, so to say, the condition I am able as a patient to fully emphasize and capture the risks for my health? And what are the safety measures where we take this decision-making power off of the patient and say we do have built-in security measures, such as technical measures, safety measures, and so on. So I think that these, if we think about the decision-making in a sense of a chain of trade-offs between these competing interests, be it on a very general regulatory level that the legislator wants to make this trade-off already and set the standards for it for different kind of applications, and going down in the different contexts, medical context, research or healthcare, all the actors, doctor, patients, or the obligations of the developers to exercise market surveillance. How did my product develop, even if it's generative AI? It can become messy, but I think it does help to think about this decision-making process about the application as a chain of trade-offs and balancing interests, because then it's easier to define which kind of decision with regard to the specific case we want to distribute to which actor. Thank you.
Okay, Isabel, if you want to add.
Yeah, shortly, to make it, from my side, really simple, and I always see the answer in risk management, of course, as I'm really fan of it. But I think if we go up a step back, I mean, if it's general purpose software and then it's not considered medical device, we still have, of course, data protection if we are using personal data, and we need to comply with it. And even in the AIAct, if you still need to have an obligation of demonstrate that your system is not high risk, for instance. So you already need to go through the process of going through a risk management, and that is linked to your accountability. So I want to believe that that step will help us to avoid any possible issues.
Well, thank you so much. My second and last clarification question, then we will open the debate, I promise you. But let's go for another case or example or whatever. Imagine that you are the type of patient that is quite uncomfortable with AI systems, the type of patient that is just considering, no, I don't want an AI system to be used in my case, in my concrete case. So I think this could open and raise quite challenging issues, because there should be some different questions to consider. For example, first, do or will we have a real legal obligation to tell the patient that an AI system is going to be used in the healthcare treatment as such? Because sometimes we don't tell, for example, a patient, well, we are going to use this kind of concrete tool. Sometimes information is not so detailed. So if you are, for example, not using personal data or something like that, seems clear, or maybe it opens a door. But if you're using his or her personal data, well, I think that in this case, data protection regulation should apply, and somehow you will be obliged to inform the patient about what you are going to do with the data. But in this case, for example, would it be possible that the patient is telling you, yeah, well, I will let you use my data for diagnosis purposes, but not if you are going to use the AI system. So that will be banned. So somehow we will be stabilizing, a new kind of of utilization of your data that in these days we are not really ready for anything like that. I mean, usually we are just asking the patient, yeah, I need your personal data for diagnosis purposes, and that's all. If you tell me yes, I would use that, in any kind of way of doing and so on. And moreover, since you were talking about information and so on, transparency in that, what will be the concrete information that we should provide him? For example, should the information be limited to the idea that this AI system will be used and the influence of this AI system will be this, or should we tell him how this concretely works and so on? Because to my understanding, it's not so clear at this moment what will be the level of information that could be really necessary, and what will be the real rights of the patient in order to know about that. So maybe since you are just checking the microphone, I guess that you will be the first one. Yeah, now please, Anastasia, go for that. Yeah, yeah, go for that, Anastasia.
Sorry, I didn't understand it. I thought, yeah. So, yeah, like as I mentioned, like there are, and also that you spoke about that there are different layers and different stakeholders, and one is transparency toward users, so so doctors, and then another layer is transparency toward patients, and it might only work if doctor is sufficiently informed. So let's imagine that he or she is sufficiently informed, and then I think what doctors should do, first of all, I think that we should say about using AI, because it's like autonomy of the patient, like under the medical informed consent, because like there is like data processing consent, right? And then like informed consent for medical invasion or something like that. But consent is not only written paper, consent might be also given orally, and this is also like, there is like research on what is consent. It's not only fact, it's also the process of a constant communication between doctor and patient. And I think that doctor actually should decide in every specific case how and what exactly to say to this specific patient in this specific case. This is how autonomy works. This is how their like trustworthy relationship should work. And also it will depend on in what kind of risks AI application can bear. If it's flu diagnosis, then one type of risk. And then, of course, the information provision is one scope. But then if it's like cancer treatment, for example, then the obligation to inform is completely different. But I think that what doctors should actually say is not about like what is AI or something like that. The most important thing that doctors should say is, I use this application for your diagnosis, and I think that the recommendation is correct because of that. So that should be like a reflection of a doctor on using AI. It's not about what the AI is or the capacities of AI. Doctor should provide the message how doctor like made the decision, because that's how they currently inform. Or like doctor should say, okay, I tried AI, but I don't trust that recommendation that much. It might be wrong or it might be right. So we might check it again or something like that. So this kind of transparency the doctor should give to a patient, I think. Thank you.
Frutsina?
Thanks very much. I actually like your answer very much, so I will connect to it. I would like to make the point of that you already mentioned the distinction between the medical intervention informed consent and the data processing informed consent. So there is, on the one hand, a medical intervention, be it based on data or any kind of physical activity, which is intrusion or an interference with the physical integrity of the patient, for which reason we have a informed consent in that kind of intervention. And whether it goes with processing data is then a secondary question, where then the data processing, so to say, has to be framed according to some kind of justification, which can be an informed consent or any other kind of justification or legal basis. It might be that for the exercise and execution of the medical intervention as an intervention into the physical integrity of the patient necessitates the processing of data, for which reason sometimes probably for the data processing itself, it might happen that it will not be the informed consent as a legal basis for the data processing that will be drawn on, but different justification because of this necessity. I also think that different concepts of doctor-patient relationship are informative with regard to this question. We do have the so-called shared decision-making model, which means that both actors on a more empowered and equal and symmetrical level bring into the medical decision-making process their information, which is specific to them, the doctor, his or her medical knowledge through the training, and so on, and the patient, his or her, so to say, assessment based on his or her well-being and what he or she understands as well-being. And those are equal, so to say, informations that have to be contributed and have to inform the decision-making about the application of any kind of medical treatment or medical tool that contributes to diagnosis and therapy. And I do think that the point of human oversight has been correctly addressed just right now, that the decision-making process should be made transparent with regard to this specific informational value that the patient provides with regard to the understanding, the personal understanding of well-being and what contributes to therapy and diagnosis and therapy. But yes, I do think that the informed consent can be challenged with regard to specific justification for data processing with regard to AI. Thank you.
Isabel, you want to add anything, or Guillermo, or what?
Yeah, it's a trouble question from my perspective, because if you look at transparency, I mean, the AIAct, for instance, is more focused on the concept of user, not the end user or affected person, like would be in this case the patient. So it doesn't really tell you how you need to inform patients, to put it like that. And then if you look at the right that affected persons could have to be informed about when it's an automatic decision. It's about high risk systems. I mean, what about if the system is not high risk? I mean, we also need to think about those things, that the scope is quite limited. I want to believe, I mean, we still have privacy, of course, right to object, consent, so we cannot forget about all those things. But I can imagine if in a situation with AI is used in the medical, as a medical device, and there's nothing really, no prediction, then I'm wondering at what point do you need to really inform the patient that AI is being used as safety component in the application? You know what I mean? So it's some information you need to to put at the level of with who are you talking to. So I'm wondering if how do we transfer that information to a patient, and if it's even really necessary, or we are eventually creating more issues. So when do we need to inform a patient when it's really necessary? I can imagine in cases, again, like prediction, when the important decisions are happening, yes, and then there's even rights for that. But otherwise, well, I'm like I said, I find it troubling. But anyways, the combination with privacy, with AIAct, and what the MDR says, I think we should find a way out of it. But in the small difference and small, what makes the small scope is what makes difficult the issue.
Guillermo, you want to add anything?
No, I think that really all the layers were very good covered. I also like the fact that you linked the information duties to human oversight somehow. There is something that should be addressed. But yeah, just a thought policy-wise that with vaccination and COVID, we have seen that, yeah, not just individuals, but groups of people were against vaccination, and maybe it has to do with the trust of our governments and our democracies. And I think with AI, it's going to be probably not the same, but it could be if we really have safe AI that provides good results to our patients. That is good, but if we make a big show out of AI, we might have those kind of individuals, groups contesting and going to the clinical practice and saying, no, I don't want AI. So my concern and my last thought would be on that part, how we make people trust AI and we don't make this big show about AI, so they go to the doctor and don't say, don't AI me. Or something.
Yeah. No, but that will be the time. Just a final comment. But for example, Soren Holm, maybe you know Soren Holm, who's in Manchester. He's already proposing kind of right of conscience, object of conscience. Is it said like this? That's it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So there might be a discussion about that in the future on whether the patient will have this kind of right or not. So just to have this final remark. So now, yeah, I guess that you were willing to make a question. So if you could please identify yourself while making the questions, that will be much better, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Adams from Meiji University in Tokyo. Thank you for a fascinating panel. I'd like to pick up on Inigo's question about generative AI, but related to something I've been looking at and thinking about for a while, which is there has been an emergence of an issue in the last 15 years or so of health applications which are not medical devices. And a lot of people, including me, have been saying that we have a regulatory gap, that there are devices which do not need the full-on medical device regulation, but they are more important than a general consumer app. And there is a gap there. So, and in particular, generative AI is being used in a way that wasn't intended, as you said. It wasn't intended. ChatGPT was not intended to be medical, but people are using it that way. People are asking, they're getting a diagnosis from the doctor, and they go away from the medic's appointment, and they think, well, I don't really understand what the medic told me. And rather than going back to the medic, for whatever reason, they go to ChatGPT and they say, explain to me what my condition is, or explain to me what the side effects are of this. Now, this is not a new problem, actually, with generative AI. It's simply made it worse. We've had this problem. I was writing about this in 2007 in a textbook for undergrads on information ethics about cyberchondria and people using Wikipedia and medical articles and misunderstanding medical data and causing themselves harm by self-diagnosing and self-treating, or causing harm by over-diagnosing themselves and going and demanding medical interventions or medical tests which were not justified. And I think this is only getting worse with the area of generative AI. Does the AIAct help? Does it go far enough? And does it help address this issue of this regulatory gap or not?
It's an excellent question. A volunteer in the panel? Yep, Rosina.
Thank you very much for the question. I think you address a very important point and without making the claim to answer in a nuanced manner with regard to specific regulations in the AIAct, I think that your point connects to a much broader societal problem of how we perceive generative AI. I do observe a certain kind of approach of anthropomorphization of AI systems in the wording, in how we talk about AI. Already the name artificial intelligence, like, why do we need to call it intelligence? Could it be just statistics? The way we talk about the AI systems, dressing it with human factors and characteristics, I think is very misleading. It will, in the end, not boil down, I think, to the question what AI can compared to humans. It doesn't really matter. If we perceive it as something part of our human intersubjective discursivity, this might sound very abstract, but I have no better terms, it will be part of it. So it doesn't really matter whether it's really comparable. Once we perceive it as such, it will be. Because we are the ones who are dressing it up. And this applies to the medical context in an extreme manner, because it is necessarily and often about death and life. It's an extreme decision-making situation in many cases. So if there is a consensual approach to medical AI chats, be it a medical device or not, it doesn't matter. It will be perceived as such by patient groups, relatively independent of the evidence that we have for the suggestions that such a system might make with regard to how the diagnosis plays out and how it's explained. Now you might ask, of course, what is the proper approach to this development? And I can only say that I think much better communication and transparency, which might sound very broad, and how to do it, of course. Again, several layers of that question, but I think that would be the right approach. And I think we just need a very different, so to say, contextual and language approach to these systems. I hope I got some of your points.
Tabel?
Yeah, and thanks for your question, and to bring to the table a problem that is, yeah, like you say, it's quite old, and that we see now, especially with large language model and in general with generative AI, but especially with large language models. And I volunteer with, I don't know if you know the OWASP community, where we build like kind of standards for security, and we have like a top 10 security vulnerabilities for large language models. And one of them is over-reliance. What we call like that, and just funny because we had these discussions and we look at over-reliance and what's sometimes called automation bias, and the fact that, and that comes originally from the medical sector. So it was not even AI, just the fact that we as humans have the tendency to believe that whatever is technical is better than us, so you can trust it. And what worries me, it's the ways to solve this, because we need to look at these two target groups here. I mean, we have, like with AI, we will have the users of our technology, where you need to implement your safeguards, training, peer reviews, double check, wherever, depends on the context, wherever you could implement there. But then we have the other target group that are really users at home looking at that type of information. And how do you solve that problem? So I only sit with training at national level, governments, giving more information. Still, internet is at home. It's really easy. It's much more comfortable. Look on internet than do anything else, and then go to the doctor, for instance. And that is something that worries me. That we talk constantly about how to solve, implement safeguards at company level. But users, affected persons at the AIAct are so little mentioned, and yeah, we need to work on that. So thank you for bringing it to the table.
I think Frosina wants to add something. Frosina? I think that you could go for that, yeah.
Just a further point to your question, I was thinking about these patient fora that we already, with or without AI, have in the internet, where there is a certain exchange between patients about experiences with different illnesses and therapies and how it plays out in everyday life, which is a very important, so to say, tool, discursive tool to deal with certain illnesses and therapies and their effects. However, if these fora and exchanges are informed by misinformation, be it generated through Wikipedia, you mentioned, or by AI, it doesn't really matter. It can have a very distortive effect, I think, and can create a false evidence, so to say, that even patient societies might be falsely relying on. And this also has to do with how the human brain works with regard to information processing. Also in different setups, not just the medical, you can observe different tendencies in online fora. We tend, because of information overload, to filter information and only perceive that already strengthens and underlines what we already know, so reinforces our already built opinion based on previous information. So we tend to blend out other information. We tend to blend out information that will require a new emotional response because it's overwhelming and we are lazy. And there is also a working of the human brain to memorize negative information more than positive, unfortunately. And it's also about a competitive attitude with regard to our evolutionary development, also in opinion exchanges. So if there are online fora and it's around the same topic and somebody distributes an opinion, and others will necessarily, according to how our brain works, want to compete with that opinion and make it even more precise or extreme. This can have, of course, in political democratic discourses, implications in cyber canalization, but also in a medical context. I think it is very important to look into, and this is my point, how the machine-human interaction plays out with regard to a distortion of information. It might also happen that the general information that is provided is correct or is evidence-based or scientifically proved, but through this specific way of interaction with the information that we do as humans, there might be developments with regard to its perceivement or interpretation, whatever that means, which is not really wished for and not desirable. And I think we need a much better focus on this human-machine interaction and information perceivement.
Thank you. I think we got time for a last target question. Yep. Oh, yep, there were two. Anyway, never mind at all, since we will remain here in the coffee break and whatever. And I think that there will be time for that. But anyway, if you could go fast and straight to the point, that would be fantastic. And maybe both of them. Yep. Okay. Well, so maybe in the way to the coffee break, they could answer the questions. Paul, thank you. Yeah.
I'm Pierre Vlastic. I'm representing the European Federation of Data Protection Officers. Before that, I was Sanofi Chief Privacy Officer, and I worked in clinical research for 30 years. And but now I'm actually also facing a situation in the hospital, dealing with my mother fighting cancer in the hospital. And I was thinking about transparency. Any people using radiology is using AI now to detect tumors and to make decisions. Does it interest my mother to know what has been used for her? So when you come to the transparency, it's important for the radiologist to know what he's using and understand the tool, but now this information doesn't really need to go to the patient. When my mother was hospitalized, she has to sign, well, not directly because she was in an emergency, so she signed afterwards 5 papers with full of information, some of which is not really very readable. So when we speak about informed consent of patient and this transparency obligation, I'm sometimes really fighting with, and I have as a DPO in a pharma company, when we deal with clinical trials, you have to try to write informed consent which are as informative and easy to understand as possible. Unfortunately, this layer after layer of regulations coming oblige us to add paragraph after pages. I've seen now informed consent in a cancer trial of 52 pages. So I think we need to find a way somehow to go to the core of what is really important when trying to meet this transparency requirements.
Yeah.
So maybe
yeah. Just very first answer. I think that Anastasia is willing to kidnap the microphone, so it will be heard. But just a short comment by myself. I think that really in this moment, transparency is something that we need to offer to the patient, but it's something that the patient does not really want. I mean, or not really need. In terms that I think what is really conflicted is that at some point it might happen that the traditional way of exposing information is somehow defied by the new way of doing. So sometimes the patient should have to make a decision in between whether I want to have an explanation or whether I just have some results, even if I don't understand why this is happening. And the healthcare giver would probably have the same thing in mind. It's one of the things that we'll have to face. But in practice, I guess that most patients want to be, want to have an answer, but especially something that really helps them to be healthy. So they have to renounce to a clear answer just in order to have the problem solved. They would probably just renounce to that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I completely agree with the point of Inigo. But I'd like also to say that, as you mentioned, there is paper, huge paper, right? And this is one form of informed consent. And this is how it works also. Currently, we're not considering even AI. But then another part of informed consent or informing process of the patient is the communication, constant communication between a doctor and a patient. And in that, for example, the long list of risks, right? But a doctor doesn't tell all the risks. A doctor says only the essential, what is more specific for the process of this concrete patient. And also, for example, your mother doesn't want to know about AI, but I would like to know, for example, patients are different. And I think a doctor also should consider the specific patient, the needs of a specific patient to know or not to know, not just about AI, but in general, right? And this is also as Forsina mentioned, autonomy and so this is and that is shared decision making. So a doctor also should tailor the information to the specific patient and specific case. And this also applies all to AI. Some should know just the fact about using AI. Some should know about how it works, for example, and some don't care at all. So I think this is my opinion. How it looks.
Something. Yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to highlight this dynamic consent approach, where there is the layered approach to giving consent, and whenever it becomes relevant, some kind of additional information the patient is asked, which might also result in information overload because you're keeping to recontact the patient. The other is just if you think about this trade-off concept I mentioned with regard to such illnesses, I mean, there is a clear interest on the patient's side for data processing, for applying the technology. So the balancing of, if you want to put it in competing interest, privacy versus data processing, plays out completely differently already on a very high level. So probably that should inform also the required transparency, because you will not accept the patient wanting to intervene and control the data processing in a privacy beneficial way if it, so to say, hinders the treatment and the cure. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, there's no time for more questions, but we will be here in any way. So thank you so much, everyone, for your attention. I hope that you find this real interesting. I did, to be sincere. So see you in the coffee break, at least, and in the way off. So thank you so much. Okay, bye.